Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to talk about the newest album from Lil Wayne, titled Free Weezy Album. You know, in today's hip-hop scene, it's kind of hard to talk about Lil Wayne. His fans think he's the greatest rapper alive, a pioneer of creative rapping techniques and wordplay that managed to accrue a lot of mainstream hits through pure explosive technique, disgustingly catchy hooks, and unquestioned charisma and bravado. Others see Lil Wayne as a charismatic rapper, but lacking in some technical skill and prone to bad fits of hyperbole and the occasional atrocious line that's impossible to ignore within their songs. Still a good rapper, but a flawed one. Still others see him as a toxic presence who brought lean, auto-tune, rapping words at themselves, hashtag rap, and the absolute abortions that are Rebirth and I'm Not a Human Being 2 to the table, and very little else beyond that. Massively overrated by an obsessive fan base and responsible for enabling the laziness of him and large chunks of his Young Money crew, who really aren't as good as they think they are. And all three groups will inevitably argue with each other in the comments of this video and will take issue with whatever I say, regardless whether it's positive or negative. But here's the thing. They're all right to some extent, at least in terms of specific stages of Lil Wayne's career. When he started off making some critical impact with the Carter, he was a hungry MC, a solid flow, a ton of swagger, and a lot of creative and mainstream accessible wordplay. And that continued through both the Carter 2 and the Carter 3, which were both genuinely great albums that I really like. They hold up even today. Then Rebirth happened, and while that record was a commercial failure and critically savage, for good reason, it's awful, it didn't immediately ruin Lil Wayne's reputation. He's still pumping out mixtapes at a frankly ridiculous rate. It's kind of easy to ignore Rebirth, and let's face it, he was too big to fail at that point. But then I'm Not a Human Being was underwhelming, and the Carter 4 didn't live up to its name, and I'm Not a Human Being 2 was absolute dog shit. And popular buzz was that Lil Wayne hadn't fallen off completely into a pit of his own reckless hedonism soaked in laziness, lean, and increasingly asinine sexual references. He was nowhere near his best anymore, and that was kind of depressing for one of the rappers who could have been one of the best. So I'll admit to being kind of surprised when the feud between Lil Wayne and Birdman erupted near the end of 2014, with Wayne accusing his former mentor of blocking releases, which absolutely baffled me considering Lil Wayne has long enough had a free rope to hang himself multiple times over with bad albums. The ultimate result was a well-publicized split with Cash Money and Lil Wayne signing with Jay-Z's Tidal, which to me looked like a really bad idea, especially considering that Lil Wayne's endorsement might still not be enough to save Tidal from being the money pit disaster that it is. But on a bigger level, Jay-Z does not deal well with stupid or incompetence unless your name is Kanye West. And unless Lil Wayne can stay sober and producing quality albums, which given his track record would still have been up in the air, I could have seen this backfiring. But putting all that aside, we now have Free Weezy album. How does the newly liberated Lil Wayne sound on the record? Well, I'll give him this. This is probably the most focused and driven that Lil Wayne has sounded in years, probably since the Carter 3. Now let's make this clear, it's not as good as the Carter 3, it's not on the level of any of his best work. Free Weezy album is still wildly uneven, features more auto-tune and outright asinine lyrics than any self-respecting rapper should include on an album, and definitely makes some questionable decisions in production and some of his guest stars. But you know what? This is actually decent, which is a lot more than I can say about the majority of Lil Wayne projects over the past 7 years. And I'll give due credit where it's due. It's not a great album, I even have a hard time calling it a good one, but it's passable, and I'll give him credit there. So let's start with Lil Wayne himself. And look, at this point, you're on the bandwagon or not, whether you like the guy. Wayne's hoarse cackle has always been expressive and charismatic. He's got personality. When he sounds engaged and hungry, he can ride a variety of flows with real intensity and power. What I've never liked, though, is his usage of auto-tune, and that unfortunately hasn't gone away. It makes Lil Wayne's half-asleep delivery at its very slowest even less appealing, because if he doesn't sound like he cares about his hedonism, why the hell should I care? Now sure, on tracks like I Feel Good and especially Pop All Up, he's spitting with some real intensity and passion, but tracks like Livin' Right, he sounds half asleep, and I don't care about that. It doesn't often help matters that his guest stars rarely step up with the same intensity, with the sheer laziness of Wiz Khalifa's verse on Livin' Right and how forgettable Capo was on Murda. Now thankfully most of the other rappers that show up, they quit themselves decently. Jeezy handles a pretty standard cocaine hustling verse of White Girl that he could drop in his sleep. Hoodie Baby is the soul-saving grace and I'm That N-word. And Cory Gunz proves how underutilized he is again on Murda with some real intensity. I like Cory Gunz. Where's that album coming? Hell, even though I thought that Euro was outclassed on Pull-Up, he did have a few punchlines that I actually liked, and his transitions with Wayne were very smooth. And besides, Lil Wayne was actually on his A game there, and it worked really well. He sounded great on that song. I'll give him this. He's got more consistently solid flows on this record than he's had in a long time. And though you get your fair share of bad rhymes or sloppy presentation or just forcing things, it's a Lil Wayne record, it's bound to happen. He's more on point and energetic than he's been in a long time, and I can appreciate that. Now, granted, the question then comes what Lil Wayne was trying trying to say with his newfound freedom, and honestly, not a lot. Yeah, you get fragments of good ideas. I like the exuberance of glory and I feel good. I like the death metaphors worked through He's Dead, and I like that he showed some focus on Without You, a song where he's trying to work through the complicated emotions that come with getting over an ex. It's actually well framed, it's got some nuance to it. What becomes a problem is that whenever we get close to introspection about wherever Lil Wayne can take his career, or questions about his legacy, the latter established fairly early on as a running theme that does get revisited, not as often as I like, but whatever, the tracks just drop back into Lil Wayne's comfort zone about blowing his rivals away with guns, hustling drugs, drinking lean, and unbridled hedonism. And I'm not sure if this is just a lack of focus or just Lil Wayne just not having more to say, but it's disappointing when you have songs like My Heart Races On or Thinking About You that could have hit a little bit harder if he just stayed on topic, but it doesn't happen. But okay, fine, his songs about hustling and luxury rap, are they at least good? Well, here's the thing, I'll definitely say Lil Wayne has solid flows on this album, as I said before. It's still got enough imagination to string together interesting bars, even if they're not exactly good ones, but for every good line or every line that I liked on a track, he'll pair it with yet another comparison with himself to shit over a cheap poop joke, or bad puns like that Ariana Grande line, or even more flossing that feels increasingly interchangeable without any storyline or arc or a framing device for these songs. And that's not counting the points where I'm just left shaking my head and asking, why are you doing this, Wayne? Was it necessary to use racial slurs against Asians on Thinking About You? Or saying you break bitches down at Pebbles on Murda? Did that really fit? Did you need to say that? Or all of Psycho? Or I'd like to say he's following Eminem's formula for a pseudo-horrorcore track stalking this girl, especially with that production, which reminds me a lot of recent Eminem in the past 5 years. But then he pairs it with lines like psychos need love too, and you realize that many of his sex references that are treated as gross or psychopathic or creepy on this song are played straight everywhere else on this album, and that otherwise means that he might be taking this song as playing it straight too, which isn't a good sign. So what ultimately saves this album if I got so much to criticize it here? Honestly, a lot of it's the production. Now sure, there's chunks of this album that fall very much into recycled and tedious trap beats that don't have the depth or potency or granular texture of better songs, especially in the back half of this album, which can drag, but Lil Wayne is at least smart enough to pick up some beats with a quicker tempo and more energy and color to them. They actually can get you hyped up. I like the symphonic swell of Glory, the Star Trek sample paired with that ragged guitar and punchy beat that picks up some horns thanks to a sample of As Animals on He's Dead. Really dug that song. The creaking pianos and horns on My Heart Races On with a decent hook that oddly reminds me of the chord progression on Lean On Me by Bill Withers, but hey, that's not a bad thing. The wall of smoky, bass-heavy production on London Roads that reminds me a lot of A$AP Rocky, but in a good way. The spacey synths on Thinking About You, and the faded pianos and real drums on Without You that actually sounded really good. Hell, there's even some trap production that I liked here, like the bass-heavy operatic darkness of Murda with a pretty propulsive groove, or the grimy simmer of White Girl. And then there's I Feel Good. And yeah, a lot of my liking for this song comes from the obvious James Brown sample, but it has a wild exuberance to the song that I really appreciated and liked. Of course, when the production does go off the rails, it gets pretty bad. Like that pitch-shifted oscillation of I'm That N-Word, or the moaning sample that anchors the melody on the otherwise pretty solid beat of Post-Bail Ballin', or the completely empty Livin' Right that just sounds underweight. These songs aren't just bad, they just bore me. So okay, to bring this all together, when this album has some energy and intensity and Lil Wayne is on topic, I can see the sparks of why I like this guy in the first place. And yeah, he's writing sharper material than arguably his last 4 albums, but on some level, it's not all that interesting or exciting. It's certainly not better than his material at his best. This is Lil Wayne's 11th album, and what's made him stand out from the crowd before was his creativity, and I only see fragments of that there in some of the wordplay, sometimes when it doesn't just get asinine. Now sure, Lil Wayne might have his freedom from Cash Money and Birdman, and it's bizarre that he doesn't take more shots at Birdman on that note, but it seems like even he's at a loss of what he's going to talk about now that he's free, and he's revisited his default subject matter so often that even he seems to be like he's running out of ideas, or maybe he just rushed this album to get something out now that he's free. That said, I'm giving this album a very light 6 out of 10 and a recommendation, especially if you're a Lil Wayne fan hoping for something of a return to form. Lil Wayne might be free, but he's got a long ways to go before he gets back on top. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time. Rest in peace to the Cash Money Weezy, gone but not forgotten.